So take a few minutes to discuss what that was like to have not much instruction and a lot of permission. And then I'll get into tonight's Dharma talk, which is on the second factor of the Eightfold Path. What was it like? And so it's both the experience of sitting without a lot of instruction, with a lot of permission to just let your mind do what it wants to do and let your body fall asleep if it wants to fall asleep, and then so the experience, but then also the experience of reflecting on it afterwards and reporting it, and kind of having to say like, well, what did happen? Let me actually tell you. Oh, I heard these sounds, and then my mind started thinking about this, and actually reporting it. There's some way that we can gain some clearer insight by recollecting and reflecting on what was going on in the meditation afterwards. So what was your experience? What are some of the things that you saw, you noticed, you felt, both in the practice and in reporting it to each other? Please, Alan.
One thing I noticed is that I had to get into a practice of constantly drinking the breath or some type of anchor in the hands or anything like that, is how quickly and individually the mind is actually kind of cutting off the thought. And so I noticed that giving myself permission to let the thought go a little bit longer or something like that, that sort of the mind would just sever.
Right.
So it was an interesting instruction to kind of see where the habit of using your head and the thoughts.
Part of this perspective is that it's an act of kindness to not sever. That even that way that we yank the attention away, it can be a bit aggressive. Now, I have my own kind of counter argument of like, but that saved my life. Because my mind was trying to kill me and I really needed to ignore it. And so I love the strict focus on the breath. But this is an interesting sort of very gentle, let it go. See what happens. Where do the thoughts go if you just let them spin out? Because they do just spin out eventually. Other thoughts, please. And this instruction of when we're caught in the train or spinning out, of returning to the hands as a very neutral, grounding in the body feeling, it's a different quality than returning to the breath, where it's like you're in your thoughts in your head and you're just only coming this far. Where it's like, no, come all the way down into the body. Feel your hands resting on your lap. It's a very intentional encouragement. Feel the body. Please.
Yeah, I noticed the more I feel my body, the less I think. It's it was interesting because it kind of felt like a radio antenna. Because I wasn't trying to think anything, but I was just picking up all the stuff. I wasn't willing any of these thoughts. They were just intruding into my brain. So it's a good lesson in not taking things so personally.
Absolutely. Part of what we're going to talk about tonight is how many of our thoughts are intentional and how many of them are unintentional, just are happening all by themselves. Please.
like I look for a problem, try to intellectualize a solution, and I get a little moody. And I go to the next problem, get a little moody, next problem, get a little moody. And I realize that it's not even a problem, it's just my mind looking for problems to find a solution. And so, making that realization is very important. So I realize these problems I'm creating in my head.
Very cool.
I felt less stressed in the day because I was very, very good at meditating.
Yes.
Which was very counterintuitive.
Right.
And I do the hands a lot more when I did focusing on breath. So whenever I focus on breath, my mind enables to focus on the noise outside and to every little movement I'm making. So like the hands, it's like, oh, I'm right here, whatever. And it's like also it's okay for me to make these things. No one knows that I'm thinking these things. Yeah, it's very much less like that.
Other people find a similar kind of less stress, like because there's less kind of efforting. That's one of the nice things about this kind of technique. Is like you don't have to try so hard to be with the breath. Just let it come and go. Please, Paul.
Yeah, I was feeling less rattled this time. Trying to stay still is always been a really big problem for me. So today was just so much easier. I felt I had to pitch a lot less. And then what was actually happening was this comfortability that so relaxed and not having to worry about getting through it. All of a sudden I was really shallow breathing. I was my heart rate started to ceiling, but I had this like all of a sudden I had this uncontrollable deep breath that like I would come back into my body. It just sucked. Meaning that like I couldn't hold that breath back. It's happened to me before. I was really struck with that.
Right. I think one of the interesting things about that is that the body does it all by itself. If it starts breathing shallow, eventually it's going to say more oxygen and it's like a yawn or something. Like it just takes care, it oxygenates itself. Which part of the, we can start see, like I take this body so personal all of the time, but it's breathing itself, the heart is beating itself and starts breathing shallow, it will take a deep breath all by itself. Like I think that's me, but the body just does it. And it can be a little jarring, sounded like. Okay. Last one, Samma.
I experience natural Brahma desires without generating them, just by paying attention to my thoughts. So in the body, compassion and metta without focused needs, etc.
Awesome. No, really, because part of what if you're interested in this, read Jason Siff's book, Unlearning Meditation. Because part of what he's saying is that when we're trying so hard to generate loving kindness and compassion, and we're doing the phrases, that something just in that effort can kind of block it. And that sometimes when you just sit back and look at what's happening in here, you notice the arising of wholesome states of kindness, of compassion, without trying to make it happen. Sometimes you just notice, oh, that's happening. Now, of course, for me, I always have the question when, someone like him is teaching it or someone's having this experience. It's like, yes, and you've been doing the practice for years, which led to this. And so then there's the question of like, if you haven't been doing these traditional practices of trying to cultivate these states, how quickly do they come all by themselves for someone who's new? So I think that having the traditional techniques is useful. And then sometimes letting go of them and just observing, just receiving is quite useful too. Anyways, you can find your way with this. And I'll give a plug before I get into the talk in case I forget later. Jason and I are going to teach a 7-day retreat in January of this recollective awareness technique in Joshua Tree. We're going to do a week of this kind of receptive, recollective awareness meditation, silent retreat out in Joshua Tree in just after the new year, starting January 7th. We couldn't get 10 days at the center. We could only get 7. January 7th through, well, we have 2 retreats coming up, October 28th through November 3rd, and then January 7th through 15th. One in the before and after the holidays. So I'm in a series, a lot of you have been coming, some of you are new, of the core 4 Noble Truths, Eightfold Path of Buddhism, the Buddha's teachings. We're on the second factor of the Eightfold Path. As a review, first Noble Truth, there is the experience of suffering in our human life. Everybody experiences it. Nobody escapes it. And life is difficult at times for all of us. And sickness and aging and death is unavoidable. And loss is unavoidable. And meeting with pain and grief and sorrow is just part of what we're doing here. It's part of life, first noble truth. There's some suffering and difficulty. And there's a cause of a lot of it. The cause of our suffering is that we have this tendency to crave and to get attached to impermanent things and want life to be pleasant all of the time. Our human survival instinct that allows us to survive also creates all of this stress, all of this suffering, all of this unnecessary difficulty on top of the pain, on top of the loss, on top of the reality that we live in. We make it worse. And then it's not really our fault, but it's just what we're born into, this system of a body and mind that aren't in harmony with reality, the impermanent reality that we live in. The third noble truth is the good news, which is freedom is possible. Nirvana, happiness, liberation, ease is possible. And that if you want this happiness, this ease, this freedom, the fourth truth takes us through the eightfold path, which are the instructions of how to get free from suffering, how to create a life of ease and a sense of well-being and more compassion for pain and more kindness and more equanimity, more balance in our hearts and our minds. And last week we talked about you have to first understand reality as it is. Understand the human condition as it is. Have the wise, appropriate view. And there's some humility needed to acknowledge that we've been a bit delusional, a bit confused about the nature of happiness, about what's happening, what it means to be a human being. We've been seduced by greed and hatred and delusion, thinking that if I got enough stuff, I'd be happy. If I had enough pleasure, I'd be happy. If I could get away with it, I'd be happy. I think that by the time most of us get desperate enough to meditate, we have some disillusionment with sensual and material sources of happiness. If the world were making you happy, you probably wouldn't be meditating on some level or another. Usually by the time we turn to meditation, we're like, shit, material, sensual doesn't work. If it worked, I'd still be out there at the orgy. I'd still be somewhere else doing, indulging. And that, at some point we wake up and we say, this doesn't work so well. Maybe there's an internal solution. I talked about last week when the 2 core components of understanding is understanding karma. that karma is a law, it is a reality. We are fully responsible for our intentional thoughts, speech, and actions. We own the karma of our actions. We own we create positive through positive, wholesome, wise, loving acts create a positive momentum in our life. Negative, selfish, greed, hatred, delusion-based. We have to understand karma. We don't get away with anything. We're fully responsible for everything that we intentionally do, say, and think. And also understanding the four truths, understanding that there is suffering. It's not all your fault. There's a cause of suffering. It's craving. It's not all your fault. It's just what it's like to have a body and be in a mind and a nervous system. And freedom is possible. It is an option if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to train your heart and your mind and to stop taking it all so personally. Nirvana is something that we can experience. Whatever it means is debatable, but happiness, freedom, ease is an option. So we have to understand that, because often we don't. We're not understanding that our happiness or unhappiness depends on how we respond to what's happening, not necessarily what's happening. That's big. My happiness depends not on what's happening in my life or what's happening in this world, but how I'm reacting to it, how I'm responding to it. And the old habitual reactive tendencies is to make everything worse and to blame everyone else and to not take karmic responsibility for how I'm showing up, for how I'm responding, for how much compassion we're bringing to the pain, both internal and external. How much non-attachment we're able to respond with to the pleasure, both internal and external. So beginning to understand the importance of compassion, the importance of non-attachment, the importance of not taking it all so personal. The second factor says, okay, you're getting a glimpse of understanding reality as it is. Now you have to align your intentions, our intentional thoughts and acts and speech, with that which will alleviate suffering. If we want to get free, and we know that greed, hatred, and delusion cause suffering, then we have to intentionally turn away from greed, renunciation, turn away from hatred, renunciation, compassion, forgiveness. Turn away from delusion, practice mindfulness, try to be present, try to be awake, try to pay attention to what's happening, not be lost in past and future. Be here, be present, feel your hands on your lap. This is all of the teachings, it's the shortest teaching in the Eightfold Path. That's why I've been killing so much time having you talk to each other. Literally, all it says is intentions that are free from hatred, free from greed, and free from ill will. Develop an intentional way of being, of acting, of thinking, of behaving that's free from greed. And, greed is everywhere from actual monetary, clinging, craving greed to just clinging. Clinging is greed, is trying to keep. Attachment is greed. It's trying to keep something that you can't keep. And this is the, big wake up call for all of us. We can't keep anything because it's all impermanent. And as soon as we attach, cling, that's an act of greed that's going to hurt us because it's impermanent. Whatever it is, the person, the place, the thing, the sensation, the emotion, the thought is going to be pulled beyond our grasp. It is impermanent, and it is going to hurt us when we try to control it, when we try to keep it, when we are greedy for it staying. That makes sense? So that's and greed feels like kind of such an ugly, big, gross thing. But, the connotation is it can be big and ugly and gross and greedy and unrighteous. And then it's just also the normal state of human beings clinging. And your mind does it all by itself and it's not your fault. And did you know how much attachment did you experience in meditation tonight? How much craving, how much clinging, how much your mind does, it just does it all by itself. The untrained mind clings. Fueled by greed. It's what we're doing. We're trying to train our heart and our mind to be less clingy, less attached, less greedy. We have to intentionally turn towards compassion. Turn towards learning to tolerate. Turn intentionally letting go. Everything's impermanent. Understand that. Intentionally letting go. One of the ways that I like to think about this is, what direction do you want to go in? What direction do we want to go in? Where are you headed? The other night at my Wednesday night class, I asked everybody, what is your intention? Why are you meditating? What's your intention? Where's your aspiration? What's your goal? What are you looking for here? Trying to get enlightened? How many of you are trying to get enlightened? How many of you are just trying to be less of a, I think one person said, I'm just trying not to hit anybody. My intention is to not hit anybody. Like, maybe this will help me not hit anybody. I'm not trying to be a Buddha. I'm just trying to stay out of jail. I think that on one level or another, I don't know if happiness isn't necessarily the right word for everybody. Maybe contentment, maybe ease, maybe I like freedom from some of the suffering, the stress, but we all have a similar intention of, I want to suffer less than I'm suffering. I want to be happier. I want to be more at ease, more peaceful, more free. And we have to intentionally align our action. We got to add all of this stuff intentionally. When you start the path, this eightfold path, this practice, there's a bunch of stuff that we have to add. I'm going to start meditating regularly. I'm going to go on some retreats. I'm going to maybe eat healthy and exercise. And, maybe there's a bunch of stuff I wasn't doing and I'm going to add to my life. Maybe meditation's the main one for a lot of us. Some people come and they've been eating healthy and exercising and socially active and politically aware, but super stressed out because they don't know how to work with their own mind. And they thought that there would be if I just exercised enough and ate right, I'd be happy. And so, that didn't work. I got super fit physically, but not emotionally, not mentally fit. So if our intention is happiness, is freedom, And we're born into this world that without an intentional redirection, the Buddha, we call this place against the stream. Because the stream of humanity is greed and hatred and delusion. That's the norm. Normal. Downstream, without any effort, you will just suffer. Suffering is effortless. Greed is effortless. You don't have to try to be greedy and get attached. Supernatural. Absolutely natural to suffer. To not suffer? Radical proposal. To be at peace, to be at ease, to be happy is an intentional act, a volitional act. Not easy. I don't want to at all present like, and then you just start meditating and you're happy. Bullshit. Super slow transformation. Insights come, hard-earned. Change happens. Trustworthy change happens pretty slowly. Unfortunately. It'd be nice if there was a quick fix. I just don't think there is. Somebody, I don't know exactly how to use this analogy, but I heard it it's like your life is a cruise ship that's been like one of the massive ship that's been going in the wrong direction. And you're like, oh shit, I'm going in the wrong direction. I want to be happy, but I'm going towards misery. I'm going to turn this thing around. I'm going to pull a Yui in this cruise ship. But it's so big and heavy and long that turn in direction is very slow. It's a 300-point turn. But I want to go north. My intention is to go north. I was pointed south all of this time, and I want to go north. And I'm going to have to intentionally turn my life around and add a whole bunch of, and part of that turn is renunciation, is subtraction. And it's what we'll get into in the next 3 weeks, at least, where we start talking about, we got to take these intentions and apply them to our communication, speech, wise communication, apply them to our actions, the 5 precepts, renouncing, killing and stealing and lying and misconduct and sexual misconduct and intoxicants. And we'll talk about intentional adding practice and intentional subtracting, renouncing the behaviors that were sending us in the wrong direction, not to where we want to be, not to where we want to go, that will never lead to happiness. Even if they, long term, even if they gave us some short-term relief, some short-term satisfaction of craving or desire or lust or whatever it was, of expression of our anger or whatever, not going to get us to the freedom that we really want, to the happiness that we really are seeking. It's hard to talk about these factors in isolation because they're all so connected. Mindfulness, our meditative skill, our life skill of mindfulness, doesn't come until number 7 on the list. But without mindfulness, you'll never fully embody the first 2 factors. Understanding reality, it takes mindfulness to understand, to see clearly, to view your own mind, your own life, your own karma, and this world. You have to be mindful. in order to be clear about what your intentions are, you have to be mindful of what your mind is doing. Oh, I'm about to say something. What's my intention behind this communication? Where am I coming from? What is fueling it? Why am I about to do what I'm about to do? Without mindfulness, we're just on autopilot. But with mindfulness, we have some awareness. And this practice we did tonight, recollecting, like, oh, why did I? Sometimes it's in retrospect that we see, oh, my intentions weren't as good as I thought they were in the moment. I just wanted to get my anger out. I just wanted to have some pleasure. My intention wasn't kindness. My intention wasn't generosity. It was selfish. So we have this really high bar. The high bar is, let's try to be kind, to be compassionate, to be honest, to be generous, loving, all the time. Let's try to be non-attached with appreciation and support for each other. Let's try to not come from jealousy, but come from appreciative joy. Let's try to not come from aversion to pain, but tolerance and compassion. Let's try, right? Let's set this high bar. My intention is to be kind. Kindness I like the word kindness because it's like situational ethics. Sometimes what's kind in one situation is generosity, and somebody asks you for a favor and you're like, sure, kind. Sometimes kindness is somebody asks you for something and you know it would just be enabling some bad behavior on their part, and the kindest thing is to say, fuck no. Kind boundary. So I like this. What's the kind thing to do is not always to say yes. Sometimes no is the kindest thing that we can do for each other. Calling each other out, holding each other accountable. Out of kindness, not out of anger, not out of hatred. But the true intention is, I care about you. I see you hurting yourself. I'm not going to enable it. I'm not going to support it. Understand intentions. The intentions apply to what we call sila, ethical behavior. And we'll get into it next week and the week after and the week after. We'll spend the next 3 weeks at least. How do we apply these intentions? Applied. It's not just in your mind, applied into our actions, into our speech, into our livelihood. And even just looking, when we get there, looking at, like, what's the intention behind my job? Why do I do what I do for a living? What is the intention? And is it wholesome? Is it based in greed? Is it based in generosity? Is it based in, and really looking at all of these things for ourselves? Again, trying not to turn this into some sort of religious, judgmental, trying to keep this practical. I want to be happy. I want to be free. Am I doing the things that are going to get me there? Does it line up with my behaviors? Does my intention, do my behaviors line up with my intentions? Do my intentions really fuel my behaviors in work, in communication, and life? Questions, comments about this factor of the path or anything else that's on your mind about Dharma, Buddhist teachings? Stevie, please.
need to create a social structure around here. Do things together to support each other, like art exchanges or picnics or doing washing graffiti or going down to the old folks' home and reading stories, doing things. It used to do some things. And I remember some of the nicest time was back on Melrose when we were doing writing the book, and we were brainstorming about how to bring a Buddhist flavor to the program. And that was just an awful lot of fun. It was like a 9-hour day or a 7-hour day, meditating, but once we kind of working together, that was an awfully, that's community.
Yeah.
Doing things for the community, exchanging with one another is community. Hey,
Yeah.
I just don't, I find, hi, I'm Monica and you're Stevie. But this doesn't go very far.
It's true. I agree.
But it is pleasant.
Yeah.
Pleasant.
No, it's
Elevator, nobody talks.
yeah. I agree with you. It's better than not talking to each other at all.
Shard of fellowship.
But absolutely, community is built by doing actions together. One of the ways that we do see it here so much, and you've been part of this, is that when people go on retreat together and have that experience of being on retreat, you come out of retreat and then you feel so much more connected with all of the other people that went through that experience with you. And I agree and would love to get a bit more organized on some community actions, some service projects. We did one thing a few months ago where some of us did with Soma's group, and I think you came out, right? Yeah, when did some stuff for the right. But we can do it again, and so, I'm totally open to that. People who want to help organize some community activities, please see me. I will support you and encourage the community to do stuff like that for sure. Please, Judy.
Can you talk a little bit more about renunciation?
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of what we'll get into in the next couple of weeks with the factors on sila and ethics and renunciation. It's core. We look at what has been causing us suffering. What are my behaviors, my attitudes, and we start to say, I gotta turn away from. I gotta stop doing these things that are fueled by these unskillful intentions and are hurting me and hurting other people. And, the Buddha gives, 5 areas, around violence and around honesty and speech and intoxicants. Intoxicants is a big one for our community. So many of us have suffered so much around addiction. And at some point you have to practice abstinence. And then practicing abstinence doesn't make all of the pain go away or the resentments go away and so then we have to practice compassion and forgiveness and, renouncing retaliation. Right? So that's so seductive when we want to fight back against the injustices and the justified resentments that we hold. And
So when you see unhealthy mind states around, so being mindful of a commitment to renunciation would be what you would react to that.
yes. I think that first there's the intention. My experience, pretty early on, I saw, okay, all of this hatred and greed, and it's causing me so much suffering. My intention is to stop, but I couldn't. It's kind of like getting sober. Like I knew I was an addict a long time before I stopped using. And I sort of had the intention, I used to regularly have the intention to I'm not going to smoke any crack tomorrow. But then I smoked crack every morning anyways. Or not every, but every, kept doing it. The intention was there to quit, but I didn't quit right away. I think it's the same with hatred or with, whatever. I want to stop. suffering about this and spilling this suffering, but I don't know how yet. But it is my intention. But that's a huge one. There's a teaching, you've probably heard me talk about it, where it's presented so simply, where the Buddha says, we just abandoned greed, hatred, and delusion in all these forms. And I was like, I was never able to just abandon. But what happened first was I used to believe in hatred. I used to think that greed and hatred and delusion were good and natural and normal, and I reveled in them. And at some point, I woke up to this just sucks. I don't believe in this anymore at all, but I don't know how to be free from it. And I came to Buddhism because it said, here's a way to get free from it. And mindfulness helped a little bit, and loving kindness sort of felt like it made it worse, but eventually helped a lot. And forgiveness sort of felt like it made me more resentful, but eventually helped a lot. But that turning of the cruise ship towards renunciation, it's like a 300-point turn. Slowly, 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 gaining the skill to actually not obey my mind, not 100% of the time, but less and less reactivity. Less and less suffering, more and more ability to respond. The Dharma teaches us this. And it happens slowly for most of us. And it's part of its renouncing not just the behaviors, but the inner attitudes and the belief. Inner attitudes. Yes. And Mara never leaves. So we have to be careful for that thing of thinking that I'm going to renounce having these kind of thoughts. Eventually, I'm going to get so spiritual that my mind will never have a resentment again. Good luck. I think it's just wired into us. The Buddha called it Mara. He said, I have to live with this quality of mind even though I'm free. It's not that it arises, it's how reactive to it we are. How personal we take it. Please, Seeker. Yeah.
Is it something that you believe is innate to humanity, or is it something that is more taught? Like that isn't innate to someone when they're born?
Both. I think it's innate. Mostly, I think it's innate. Mostly, I think that we are in a animal body that is fueled by a survival instinct that is manifests as craving for pleasure and survival. Craving pleasure will equal survival. Attachment will equal survival. Hating pain, if pain equals death, hate pain. I think that it's innate wiring of millions of years of evolution, that it's just our wiring, and that neuroscience talks about this brain stem activity that's just fight or flight and freeze, and it's just how we're wired. And so they call it the reptilian brain because we've evolved on so many levels, but there's still most of what's happening in our mind is fueled by that amygdala. Fight, flight, eat, fuck, kill. Just what the mind does. So I think it's innate. Now, because it's innate, we condition each other and create society, and we create unbridled capitalism, right? Because of that, it creates all of the systems that we're in, and all of the conditioning that we're experiencing is created by that innate craving, aversion, self-centeredness of the human condition. which makes it even worse. And we have the technology. Not only do we have natural greed, now we have the technology of greed and the systems to get more and kind of the 1% owning everything. But I think it's innate. There's a great quote where the Buddha, where this against the stream quote comes from. He says, in this generation where people are so greedy, they're so self-centered, they're so based in hate and delusion, who's going to practice this path of wisdom and compassion? Who's going to go against the stream? And he's talking about 2,600 years ago, where there's wandering meditators everywhere. And, people are doing practice. And we think about our culture, there's always this sort of but it's so much worse now. He said he didn't think there was any hope for his generation. And said, I think that, I'll teach the Dharma for those who can hear it and are willing to turn towards their own pain and develop compassion for it. Anyways, I'm going on and on, but my sense is pretty innate. And conditions make it worse or better. We can leave it there for tonight. Thank you for your practice and for considering these things. The Buddha's Dharma is meant to be for your consideration, for your reflection. Find out for yourself what feels true. Look at your intentions. Take this perspective and investigate it. Pause before you speak. Why am I about to say this? Pause before you act. What's the intention behind this? Bring your mindfulness to this level of intention and practice that receptive awareness. See how that goes. Read Jason's book. Come on retreat with us in October if you can. Come in January if you can. The more time and effort and reflection and practice we put in, the more benefit we gain from these practices. Couple of announcements. We do have a sitting group. We have a 45-minute sit, 45 minute on Wednesday nights. So it's a small group. Join us. Come sit with us in silence on Wednesdays. And then I do some Dharma discussion afterwards. And for the next couple of months, we have a guest teacher, Alan Clement, who's teaching Thursday nights at 7:30. Also, everything is by donation. Come and check out Alan. A bunch of us were here. His first class was last week. It was very interesting. It wasn't a meditation class. It was just a lecture. He might do some meditation in some future classes, but he's an old school Buddhist and has some very interesting perspectives. So if you're interested, come join us Thursdays. I'd like to get a day-long scheduled. I'll try to get my shit together about that. I said June and then I said July, and maybe we can find a date in August or September to do a day of practice together here. Class is done by donation. There's a bowl on the table there. Suggested donation is $15 to $20. If you would like to give more, it's okay to give more. If you don't have that kind of money to donate tonight, it's fine to give less. Give whatever feels appropriate to you. And if you don't have cash and you'd like to use a card, Chris will be at the desk and can use the Square reader for the donation. There's also books and t-shirts and stuff like that if you want any of the swag. May any goodness that comes from our practice be shared outward in all directions with all beings everywhere.